Admiral Kate Sullivan floated in her command chair aboard the UES Vengeance, watching the tactical display show the massive hegemony fleet approaching the Keth Mori homeworld like a black tide of death. 8,000 vessels stretched across space in perfect formation, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with the organic technology that had conquered 17 star systems. At the center of the formation hung the Hegemony Command Fortress, a structure the size of a small moon that broadcast psychic dampening fields powerful enough to paralyze entire planetary populations. "Ma'am, all human vessels report ready," said Lieutenant Commander Alex Carter, his voice carrying the calm professionalism that came from months of fighting impossible odds. "Fleet Admiral Chen confirms the Earth Defense Force is in position for Operation Deathworld." Kate nodded as she studied the enemy formation. The Hegemony had deployed exactly as human intelligence had predicted, arranging their forces to maximize the psychological impact of their victory on the watching galaxy. Every major news network from 43 worlds was broadcasting the approaching battle, expecting to witness the final demonstration of hegemony superiority. "Communications. Patch me through to all ships," Kate ordered. The bridge fell silent as Kate activated the fleet-wide channel, knowing that her words would reach not just the 200 human vessels preparing for battle, but also the alien allies who had become humanity's adopted family over the past months. "This is Admiral Sullivan to all human forces," she began, her voice carrying across the vacuum to ships scattered throughout the system. "6 months ago, we learned that humanity was not alone in the universe. Today, we're going to teach the galaxy why that's the best news any species could hope for." She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew and seeing her own determination reflected in their expressions. "The Hegemony believes superior numbers and technology guarantee victory. They've never faced opponents who fight not just to survive, but to protect others who can't protect themselves. Today we show them why Earth's children are the galaxy's apex predators." The first phase of the battle began exactly as the Hegemony expected. Their long-range weapons opened fire on the scattered human vessels, energy beams and bioorganic missiles filling space with destruction that should have vaporized any conventional fleet. The watching galaxy held its breath, expecting to see humanity's brief resistance crushed within minutes. Instead, the human ships accelerated directly into the incoming fire. "Ma'am, Captain Morrison reports successful penetration of the enemy outer screen," Alex reported, his voice tight with concentration as he coordinated fleet movements that would have been impossible for any other species. "The Challenger took heavy damage, but they're still operational and engaging at close range." Kate watched the tactical display show human vessels weaving through hegemony formations like wolves among sheep, their smaller size and aggressive, maneuvering allowing them to avoid the worst of the enemy fire while closing to ranges where human weapons became devastatingly effective. "Psychic dampening fields are having minimal effect on our crews," reported Dr. Pierce from his station, monitoring human biosigns across the fleet. "If anything, combat stress seems to be improving reaction times and tactical thinking." The Hegemony Command Fortress began broadcasting psychic interference at maximum power, a wave of mental pressure that had broken the will of every species they had ever faced. Across the human fleet, bridge crews felt the familiar sensation of something trying to crawl inside their minds and tell them to surrender. Instead, they got angry. "Ma'am, this is Colonel Williams aboard the UES Normandy," came Grace's voice over the communication system, accompanied by the sounds of close-quarters combat. "My boarding parties have successfully penetrated 3 hegemony vessels. Enemy biomachines are showing signs of system failure when exposed to direct human aggression." Kate smiled grimly as she realized what Grace had discovered. The hegemony biomachines had been designed to fight opponents who became less effective under stress, not more effective. Human boarding parties were literally scaring the enemy technology into malfunction. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," Kate broadcast. "Initiate close combat protocols. Show them what apex predators do when someone threatens their pack." What followed would be remembered as the most savage space battle in galactic history. Human vessels abandoned all defensive tactics and launched themselves directly at the hegemony fleet with a fury that terrified even their allies. Ships damaged beyond any reasonable hope of survival continued fighting, their crews using manual controls when automated systems failed, and ramming enemy vessels when weapons ran out of ammunition. "Ma'am, Captain Morrison's ship just lost main power," Alex reported, his face pale as he watched the tactical display. The Challenger is drifting directly toward the command fortress. Kate felt her heart skip as she watched Jake's ship, battered and burning, continue moving toward the massive hegemony command structure. "Get me Captain Morrison on direct communication." Jake's face appeared on the main screen, his command bridge lit by emergency lighting and filled with smoke from damaged systems. Behind him, Kate could see his crew working frantically to keep their ship operational despite catastrophic damage. "Admiral, this is Morrison," Jake said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "We've lost engines, weapons, and life support, but we still have forward momentum toward the command fortress. Request permission to complete our mission." Kate understood immediately what Jake was asking. The Challenger was dying, but it still had enough momentum to reach the hegemony command structure. With their ship's reactor set to overload, they could take the fortress with them. "Jake, there has to be another way," Kate said, though she knew there wasn't. "Admiral, we've got alien friends depending on us," Jake replied. "That's more important than any of our individual survival. Besides, this is what humans do. We protect our family." The communication channel filled with voices as Jake's crew confirmed their readiness for the final assault. Lisa Grant reported that she had rerouted all remaining power to the reactor overload sequence. Ben Hayes confirmed that manual navigation controls would allow them to maintain course even with all automated systems offline. Dr. Martinez calmly noted that the radiation levels would kill them long before the reactor detonated, but they would remain conscious long enough to complete their mission. "It's been an honor serving with you all," Jake said to his crew, then looked directly at Kate through the screen. "Tell the galaxy that when humanity gives its word to protect someone, we keep that promise no matter what it costs." The Challenger disappeared from the tactical display in a ball of nuclear fire that vaporized the hegemony command fortress and sent shockwaves through their entire fleet. The psychic dampening fields that had broken the will of dozens of species died with the fortress, and for the first time in 3 years, the galaxy felt hope instead of fear. But the battle was far from over. The remaining hegemony vessels, their command structure destroyed, and their biomachines malfunctioning from exposure to human aggression, began to retreat in disorder. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched them flee and made a decision that would echo through galactic history. "All ships pursue and engage," she ordered. "No hegemony vessel leaves this system alive." What followed was not a battle but a hunt. Human vessels chased down retreating hegemony ships with the relentless determination of pack predators who had scented wounded prey. Ships that had been terrorizing the galaxy for years found themselves being hunted by opponents who seemed to become more dangerous as the fight continued. Colonel Grace Williams led boarding parties onto hegemony vessels, her Marines fighting through biomechanical defenders with an efficiency that horrified the watching galaxy. When aliens asked how humans could remain effective in conditions that paralyzed other species, Grace gave an answer that became famous across 43 worlds. "We come from a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us," she said while standing in the wreckage of a hegemony command center. "Combat stress is just Tuesday afternoon for us." The battle ended 12 hours later with the complete destruction of the hegemony fleet. Not a single enemy vessel escaped to carry word of their defeat back to whatever remained of their empire. The galaxy watched in amazement as human ships, many of them barely functional, began rescue operations for hegemony survivors with the same determination they had shown in combat. "Admiral Sullivan, this is General Thundel," came the voice of the Kethmori commander from his homeworld's surface. "On behalf of my people and all free beings in the galaxy, I must thank you for what your species has done today. But I must also ask, what kind of beings are you humans, really?" Kate looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew, seeing exhaustion, grief for fallen comrades, and satisfaction at a job well done. She thought about Jake Morrison and his crew, who had given their lives to protect aliens they had known for less than a year. She thought about the peaceful species who had welcomed humanity into galactic civilization, and the trust they had placed in Earth's children. "General, we're the kind of beings who evolved on a world that taught us the most important lesson in the universe," she replied. The crystal towers of Zephyria gleamed under 3 pale suns, as beings from across the galaxy gathered in the Great Council chamber. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert dozens of alien languages into something resembling understanding. Fear filled the massive hall like a thick fog that everyone could taste but nobody wanted to name. Speaker Veltar of the Merlani floated in his water-filled sphere at the center of the room, his blue-scaled skin rippling with worry patterns that his people had not displayed for 1,000 years. Around him sat representatives from 43 different worlds, each one carrying news that grew worse by the day. The hegemony empire was coming, and nothing seemed able to stop them. The Kethmori colonies fell yesterday, announced General Thundel, his ancient turtle-like features showing exhaustion that went beyond mere physical tiredness. 300,000 of my people taken as slaves or worse. His heavy shell creaked as he shifted in his seat, the sound echoing through the silent chamber like breaking bones. The plant beings called Silvani rustled their leaves in their species' version of mourning. Their representative, a towering figure named Rootsinger Myreth, spoke with a voice like wind through autumn trees. The growing worlds of Sector 9 are ash now. The hegemony burned them all rather than let us evacuate our young seedlings. Ambassador Zixara of the insectoid Vorthak clicked her mandibles in distress. Her compound eyes reflected the chamber's light in thousands of tiny fragments, each one showing the same hopeless expression. My mining colonies sent final transmission 6 hours ago. The hegemony war machines broke through our defensive networks like they were made of paper. Speaker Veltar's gills fluttered as he processed the reports. For 3 years now, the same pattern had repeated across 17 star systems. The hegemony would arrive with their massive black ships, deploy their biomechanical warriors, and within days entire civilizations would be reduced to burning ruins or slave camps. Their technology seemed designed specifically to counter every defensive measure the peaceful species of the galaxy had developed over millennia. "How many ships do they have now?" asked Counselor Dex Ani of the energy beings known as Lumara. Her form flickered between solid and pure light as emotions overtook her usual control. "Intelligence reports suggest over 10,000 vessels," replied General Thundel. "But that number grows daily as they convert our captured ships to their purposes. Their biomechanical modifications turn our own technology against us." The chamber filled with the sounds of despair from dozens of species. Some wept. Others made clicking sounds of grief. And the Silvani released spores that carried the chemical signature of their deepest fears. In 3 years of war, not a single major victory had been achieved against the hegemony forces. "What about the psychic dampening technology?" asked a representative from the telepathic Zenthori, her mental voice reaching every mind in the chamber. "Have our researchers found any way to counter it?" Speaker Veltar's water sphere clouded with his negative emotions. The dampening field shut down higher brain functions in all tested species. "Our most brilliant tacticians become helpless within minutes of exposure. Even our AIs malfunction when subjected to the hegemony's neural interference." Old historian Grundal of the Kethmori shifted his massive bulk, drawing attention with the slow, deliberate movements of his ancient species. His eyes held memories spanning 3 centuries, and when he spoke, the chamber fell completely silent. "There might be another option," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Speak freely." "Old friend," urged General Thundel. Grundle's thick fingers worked out a data pad with surprising delicacy for such a large being. The deep archives contain references to a world designated as Class Death by the old survey teams. Sector 7 Alpha, system designation Sol. The survey ship that found it reported the planet was inhabited by what they called extreme survival specialists, but recommended avoiding all contact. Class Death. "Worlds are myths," protested Ambassador Zixara. "No intelligent life could evolve under such conditions." "Perhaps," said Grundle, "but the survey logs are real. The species there survived ice ages, volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, and predators that would terrify our worst nightmares. The surveyors classified them as potential galactic threats if they ever developed space travel." The chamber erupted in debate. Half the representatives dismissed the idea as desperate fantasy, while others argued they had nothing left to lose. Speaker Veltar raised one webbed hand for silence, and gradually the arguing died down. "What exactly did these survey logs say about this species?" he asked. Grundle's ancient eyes took on a distant look as he accessed memories filed away decades ago. They called the planet Earth. The dominant species showed patterns of controlled aggression, pack-hunting behaviors, and something the surveyors termed protective violence toward their young and weaker members. Most disturbing to the survey team was their apparent enjoyment of dangerous activities and their tendency to bond with other species, even natural enemies. "That sounds like a species of monsters," whispered root singer Myrith, her leaves trembling. "Perhaps," agreed Grundall, "but monsters who choose what they protect." The final survey note recommended marking the system as off-limits but potentially valuable as allies, if they could be approached carefully. The surveyors believed these humans might be the only species in the galaxy capable of matching the hegemony's appetite for warfare. A long silence fell over the chamber as each representative considered the implications. Outside the crystal walls, Zephyria's 3 suns were setting, casting strange shadows across the council floor. In the distance, early warning sensors had begun detecting the energy signatures that always preceded hegemony arrival. "The advanced scouts are 2 systems away," reported the chamber's AI with mechanical calm. "Projected arrival in Zephyrian space is 72 hours. Speaker Veltar closed his large eyes and felt the weight of 43 civilizations resting on his decision. When he opened them again, his voice carried the authority of someone who had already accepted the consequences of his choice. "Prepare a diplomatic vessel," he said. "Load it with our most advanced translation software and every piece of cultural data we can gather about this human species. If they truly are Deathworld survivors, perhaps they will understand what it means to fight for something worth protecting." The council chamber began to empty as representatives hurried to contact their home worlds with the news. Some went to prepare evacuation plans while others began gathering what military forces remained for a final stand at Zephyria. But a few, including old Grundall, stayed behind to help prepare humanity's first contact with the wider galaxy. As the diplomatic ship launched toward the unknown system called Sol, none of them could imagine that they were about to meet the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. Dangerous not because they were cruel, but because they had learned to be kind despite being born on a world that had tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the tactical display show the burning world of Alterash growing larger on their approach vector. 3 months had passed since first contact with the Galactic Council, and in that time humanity had learned more about warfare on a galactic scale than they had ever wanted to know. The hegemony was everything the aliens had described and worse, a machine of conquest that turned entire star systems into slave camps or ash. "Ma'am, we're receiving transmissions from the surface," reported Communications Officer Danny Brooks, his young face tight with concentration. "It's General Thundell of the Kethmori forces. They're requesting immediate assistance." Kate nodded grimly. The Kethmori had been holding underground positions on Alterash for 4 months now, but their defensive lines were finally cracking under the hegemony's relentless assault. According to the intelligence reports, the turtle-like aliens had maybe 6 hours left before their final bunkers were breached. "Put him through," Kate ordered. The main screen flickered to show the scarred shell of General Thundell, his ancient features marked by exhaustion, and something that looked like barely controlled despair. Behind him, Kate could see other Kethmori moving through what appeared to be a command bunker carved from solid rock. "Admiral Sullivan," Thundell said, his translator giving his words a mechanical quality that couldn't quite hide the emotion beneath. "I must report that our defensive perimeter has been reduced to a 3-kilometer radius around our primary shelter. The hegemony biomachines have broken through sectors 7 and 12. We estimate complete overrun within 6 hours." Kate studied the tactical data her staff had been feeding her for the past week. The hegemony had deployed over 50,000 biomechanical warriors to Alterash, supported by atmospheric processors that were slowly converting the planet's air to something more suitable for their hybrid organisms. It was a textbook example of their standard conquest pattern. "General, we're going to try something that might seem crazy to your people," Kate said. "I need you to pull all your forces back to the deepest bunkers and seal them. Don't come out no matter what you hear on the surface." Thundell's compound eyes showed confusion. "Admiral, retreating further will only delay our defeat by hours at most. The hegemony will simply dig us out. Trust me, General. What we're about to do works better when friendly forces are safely underground." Lieutenant Commander Alex Carter looked up from the flight operations console. "Ma'am, all squadrons report ready for launch. Colonel Williams confirms her ground teams are prepared for immediate deployment." Kate took a deep breath and activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the Admiral. Today we show the galaxy what humanity learned from 10,000 years of warfare on a death world. Today we teach the hegemony why Earth's children don't surrender. She paused, thinking about the peaceful alien species who were depending on them. Make our ancestors proud. The first wave of human fighters launched from the Vengeance like angry wasps from a disturbed hive. Alex Carter led 12 squadrons in a coordinated attack pattern that would have been considered suicidal by every tactical manual in the Galactic Council's databases. Instead of approaching the planet cautiously and engaging the hegemony forces at long range, the human fighters dove straight into the atmosphere at maximum velocity. The hegemony orbital defense platforms had been designed to counter the cautious, long-range tactics favored by galactic civilization. They were completely unprepared for fighters that accelerated toward them, while firing everything they had. The first platform exploded in a ball of superheated plasma, before its automated systems could even classify the incoming threats. "This is Carter to all units." Alex's voice crackled over the communication system as his fighter screamed through Altair Esch's upper atmosphere. "Remember, these things have never faced opponents who actually want to get close to them. Use it." On the planet's surface, the hegemony biomachines had been methodically advancing on the Keth Mori positions, with the slow inevitability of a glacier. Their armored exoskeletons were designed to shrug off the energy weapons favored by galactic civilizations, and their psychic dampening fields had reduced the defending aliens to a state of barely functional terror. Then the human drop pods started, falling from the sky like meteors. Colonel Grace Williams felt her teeth rattle as her pod slammed into the ground at terminal velocity, the impact absorbers screaming in protest as they bled off energy that would have turned any other species into organic paste. Around her, 200 more pods were creating craters across the battlefield as the 1st Marine Assault Battalion made planetfall in the most aggressive way possible. "Sound off," Grace ordered as she kicked her pod's hatch open and rolled out into what looked like hell with better lighting. "Sergeant Nina Ross, 2nd Platoon All Green," came the first response. "Corporal Pete Johnson, Engineering Section ready to make things explode," reported another voice. One by one, her people checked in as they emerged from their pods into an environment that would have paralyzed most galactic species with fear. The air was thick with smoke and the chemical signatures of hegemony bioweapons, while the ground shook under the impact of orbital bombardments that the aliens had been enduring for months. "Ma'am, I count approximately 3,000 hegemony biomachines within our immediate area," reported Nina Ross, her voice calm despite the circumstances. "They appear to be confused by our arrival method." Grace looked across the battlefield at the enemy forces and felt a savage smile cross her face. The hegemony biomachines were indeed confused, their formation patterns breaking down as they tried to process an enemy that had literally fallen from the sky into the middle of their advance. "That's because they've never fought anyone crazy enough to drop directly on top of them," Grace said. "Johnson, how long do you need to set charges on their command node?" "Give me 10 minutes and a clear path, ma'am," Pete replied, already pulling demolition equipment from his pack. "You heard him, Marines. We hold this ground for 10 minutes. Show these biomechanical nightmares what happens when they threaten our new friends." The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The hegemony biomachines had been designed to counter every type of warfare the peaceful galactic species had ever developed, but they had never faced opponents who charged toward their psychic dampening fields instead of away from them. Human Marines moved through psychic interference that should have rendered them helpless, their minds apparently resistant to effects that paralyzed other species. When their energy weapons proved less effective against hegemony armor, they switched to explosive devices and close-quarters combat tactics that horrified their alien allies watching from orbit. "Ma'am, the dampening field isn't affecting our people the way the intelligence reports," reported Nina Ross as she methodically took apart a biomachine with a combination of plasma charges and what appeared to be an entrenching tool. If anything, some of the guys seemed to be enjoying the challenge. Grace looked around the battlefield and realized Nina was right. Instead of being paralyzed by the psychic effects that had broken every other species the hegemony faced, her Marines were adapting their tactics in real time and showing signs of what could only be described as aggressive enthusiasm. "Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years," she said into her communication system. "A little psychic pressure just makes us mad." Pete Johnson's voice crackled over the radio from somewhere near the hegemony command node. "Charges set, ma'am. You might want to find cover." The explosion that followed vaporized the command structure and sent a shockwave across the battlefield that knocked down biomachines for kilometers in every direction. In the sudden silence that followed, Grace could hear something she hadn't expected. Cheering from the underground bunkers where the Keth Mori had been hiding. "Admiral Sullivan to Colonel Williams," came Kate's voice over the orbital communication channel. "Satellite imagery shows the hegemony forces are in full retreat."
"How are your casualties?"
Grace looked around at her Marines, who were already setting up defensive positions and treating their wounded with an efficiency that came from years of training for exactly this kind of fight. "Light casualties, ma'am. Nothing our medics can't handle." "Outstanding work, Colonel. Stand by for extraction and prisoner processing." As the human forces began securing the battlefield, General Thundell's voice came over the communication system from his bunker. "Admiral Sullivan, I must ask, how did your people fight effectively under psychic dampening conditions that render other species helpless?" Kate's answer would be repeated across the galaxy within hours, carried by refugees and survivors to every world that still had the courage to hope for freedom. "General, humanity spent its entire evolutionary history being hunted by things bigger, stronger, and meaner than we were. We learned to fight scared, fight hurt, and fight outnumbered. The hegemony's psychic warfare might work on species that evolved in paradise, but we come from a world that was trying to kill us long before we were smart enough to be afraid of it." Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee and reviewing patrol reports when the proximity alarm started screaming throughout the UES Challenger. The coffee mug hit the deck with a metallic clang as he lunged for the command console, his fingers dancing across controls with the practiced ease of someone who had spent 15 years in deep space. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, called out. Lieutenant Lisa Grant from the communication station, her voice steady despite the adrenaline that Jake could see in her tight shoulders. "Unknown configuration, definitely not human design. It's broadcasting on multiple frequencies." "Any weapon signatures?" Jake asked, settling into his captain's chair while his mind ran through first contact protocols that he had hoped never to use. Tactical Specialist Ben Hayes looked up from his sensor array with a confused expression. "Sir, the ship appears to be constructed from some kind of living crystal. I'm reading organic components mixed with technology I can't identify. No obvious weapons, but honestly, I have no idea what I'm looking at." Jake nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We have made contact with what appears to be an alien vessel. All departments move to first contact protocols. This is not a drill." He paused for a moment, thinking about how this moment would change everything for humanity. "And somebody get Dr. Martinez up here with the xenobiology kit." The alien ship hung in space like a work of art, its crystalline hull catching and refracting the light from Sol's distant sun into patterns that seemed almost alive. It was smaller than the Challenger, but moved with a grace that suggested technology far beyond anything humanity had developed. "Captain, I'm getting something that might be a communication attempt," Lisa reported, her hands moving across her console as translation software that had never been tested on actual aliens struggled to make sense of the incoming signals. "It's incredibly complex, like they're trying to transmit in 50 different ways at once." "Keep working on it," Jake said, then turned to Ben. "Any sign of more ships?" "Negative, sir. Just the one vessel, and it's maintaining a respectful distance. Whatever they want, they're not being aggressive about it." Dr. Sophia Martinez arrived on the bridge carrying a case full of equipment that humanity had spent decades developing based on theoretical alien contact scenarios. Her dark eyes were bright with excitement and terror in equal measure. "Captain, are we really looking at our first contact with an alien species?" "Unless this is the most elaborate hoax in human history," Jake replied, then looked back at Lisa. "Any progress?" Lisa's face suddenly lit up with surprise. "Sir, I think I'm getting something. The translation matrix is starting to make sense of their base mathematical concepts. They're using prime numbers as a foundation for— Wait." She paused, listening to something coming through her earpiece. "Captain, they're speaking English now. Broken English, but definitely English." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "Put it through the main speakers." The bridge filled with a voice that was clearly not human but was struggling to form familiar words. "Please, do not fear us. We come seeking help. Our people are dying." The bridge crew exchanged glances as the weight of the moment settled on them. After decades of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, the answer had just asked them for help in broken English. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Challenger," Jake said, speaking slowly and clearly toward the communication array. "We receive your transmission. What kind of help do you need?" The response came more quickly this time, as if the alien speaker was learning their language in real time. "My name is Ambassador Zixara of the Vorthok people. We represent the Galactic Council of 43 Worlds. A terrible enemy destroys all life in our galaxy. We have heard stories of your species from the old surveys. We come to ask if you will help us fight." Ben Hayes looked up from his tactical display with wide eyes. "Sir, they're talking about an entire galactic community, and apparently someone surveyed us before." Dr. Martinez was already setting up her equipment to analyze the alien transmission. "The linguistic adaptation rate is incredible. They've learned more English in the last 5 minutes than most humans learn of a new language in months." "Ambassador Zixara," Jake said, "we would be honored to speak with you further. Would it be possible for us to meet in person? We have protocols for first contact situations." "We have similar protocols," came the reply, and Jake could swear he heard relief in the alien voice. "We can adapt our ship's atmosphere to support your life form, or we can meet in the space between our vessels if you prefer." Jake looked at his crew, seeing the mixture of excitement and fear on their faces. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about and feared in equal measure. "We'll meet aboard your vessel if you're certain it's safe for us." 2 hours later, Jake found himself floating in the docking tube between the two ships. Wearing a full environmental suit and carrying more recording equipment than any one person should reasonably need, Lisa and Ben were with him, along with Dr. Martinez and her xenobiology kit. The alien ship's airlock opened to reveal a chamber that looked like the inside of a geode, with crystal formations growing from every surface in patterns that seemed to follow some kind of mathematical logic. The air had a slight metallic taste that their suit's sensors confirmed was safe to breathe. Ambassador Zixara was waiting for them, and Jake's first thought was that she looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a work of art. Her compound eyes reflected their helmet lights in thousands of tiny rainbows, and her forearms moved with a fluid grace that was somehow both alien and strangely familiar. "Captain Morrison," she said, her English now almost perfect despite having learned it minutes ago, "I must thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Your species has a reputation in the old survey files as being dangerous." "Dangerous how?" asked Ben, his tactical training making him focus on potential threats even in this historic moment. Zixara's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "The survey teams that found your world 300 years ago classified it as a class death planet. They said your species had survived extinction events that would have destroyed any other form of life they had encountered. They also noted that humans seemed to engage in violent activities for entertainment." Dr. Martinez laughed despite the situation. "You mean sports?" "The surveyors noted that your species voluntarily participated in contests where individuals attempted to render each other unconscious, while crowds of other humans watched and cheered. They found this behavior deeply disturbing." "Boxing matches," Jake said with a grin. "Wait until you hear about football." Zixara's eyes somehow managed to convey confusion despite being compound. "Why do your people do these things?" "For fun," Lisa said simply, "and to test ourselves against worthy opponents." The alien ambassador was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could almost see her processing this information. "The survey teams were right to be concerned about your species. You truly are unlike any other intelligent life we have encountered." "Tell us about this enemy you're fighting," Jake said, getting the conversation back to the urgent matter at hand. Zixara's entire body language changed, becoming somehow smaller and more fragile. "The Hegemony Empire has conquered 17 star systems in 3 years. Their biomechanical war machines are unlike anything we have ever faced. They use psychic dampening technology that renders our greatest minds helpless, and they convert our own captured ships against us." Ben was already thinking tactically. "What kind of defensive strategies have you tried?" "Defensive strategies are all we know," Zixara replied. "Our species evolved on peaceful worlds. We have never had to develop the kind of aggressive tactics that your survey files suggest humans consider normal." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach as he realized what the alien was really saying. These beings had evolved in paradise while humanity had been forged in hell, And now hell was coming for paradise. "How long before they reach your core worlds?" he asked. "The hegemony advanced scouts are already in the Zephyrian system. Our projections suggest full invasion within days." Jake looked at his crew and saw his own thoughts reflected in their faces. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if they would ever meet another intelligent species. And now that they had, those species were asking for help against something that sounded like humanity's worst nightmare brought to life. "Ambassador," Jake said quietly, "we need to contact our military command immediately. If what you're describing is accurate, this is going to require a response from all of Earth." Zixara's compound eyes seemed to brighten with something that might have been hope. "Your people will help us?" Jake thought about humanity's long history of fighting impossible odds to protect the innocent, and he knew there was only one answer he could give. "Ambassador, you're about to learn why the survey teams classified Earth as a class death world. We don't just survive extinction events, we fight back." Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Vorthak Prime, studying holographic displays that showed 17 star systems in various stages of liberation. 6 weeks had passed since the victory at Altair Ish, and humanity had been fighting across multiple fronts with a speed and aggression that left their alien allies struggling to keep up with battle reports. "Sir, we're getting confirmed reports from the Nexalos operation," said Commander Lisa Grant, her voice carrying exhaustion mixed with something that might have been pride. "Colonel Williams and her ground teams have successfully eliminated the hegemony bioweapons facility. Dr. Pierce reports that the toxin production equipment has been completely destroyed." Jake nodded as he updated the tactical display. The poisonous world of Nexalos had been one of the hegemony's primary bioweapon development sites, a planet so hostile that even their hybrid organisms required extensive protective equipment to operate there. It had also been considered impossible to assault by conventional galactic military doctrine. "Any casualties?" Jake asked. "Surprisingly light, sir. The environmental suits Dr. Pierce developed are working better than projected. Turns out human biology adapts to hostile environments faster than the hegemony bioweapons can compensate." Dr. Sam Pierce materialized in the holographic communication field, his image flickering slightly from the interference generated by Nexalos's toxic atmosphere. Behind him, Jake could see Marines in specialized environmental gear moving through what appeared to be a landscape from humanity's worst nightmares. "Captain, the most interesting discovery is that the hegemony organisms actually become less effective in truly hostile environments," Dr. Pierce reported, his scientific excitement clear even through the static-filled transmission. "They're designed for conquest of garden worlds, not survival on death worlds like this one." "Explain that in tactical terms." "Doctor," Jake said, "the biomachines start breaking down after extended exposure to the kind of environmental stressors that humans consider normal operating conditions. Their psychic dampening technology also becomes unreliable in high-stress environments, which explains why it's less effective against us." Jake felt a cold smile cross his face as the implications became clear. The hegemony had spent generations perfecting weapons designed to defeat civilizations that had evolved in paradise. They had never considered what would happen when they faced opponents who had been shaped by hell itself. "Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Sullivan," Lisa reported. "Priority Alpha." The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Kate Sullivan on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, her expression grim despite the recent victories. Behind her, Jake could see tactical displays showing hegemony fleet movements across multiple sectors. "Captain, we have a situation developing," Kate said without preamble. "Intelligence indicates the hegemony high command is consolidating their remaining forces for a major counteroffensive. They're pulling back from conquered territories to mass their fleets." "How major are we talking about, Admiral?" Jake asked. "Every remaining hegemony vessel supported by their entire biomechanical ground force. Intelligence estimates over 8,000 ships and 500,000 biomachines, all converging on the Keth Mori home system." Jake whistled low. The numbers were staggering, representing the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. "What's the strategic objective?" "They're going to make an example," Kate replied. "If they can destroy the Keth Mori homeworld in front of the entire galaxy, they believe it will break the resistance movements we've been supporting on the occupied worlds." Commander Lisa Grant looked up from her communication console with concern clear on her face. "Sir, The Kethmori military is requesting immediate evacuation assistance for their civilian population. General Thundell estimates they can only delay a force that size for maybe 6 hours. Jake thought about the ancient, peaceful, turtle-like beings who had first welcomed humanity into galactic civilization. The idea of their homeworld being turned into an example of hegemony brutality made something cold and angry settle in his chest. "Admiral, what's our response going to be?" he asked. Kate's expression became something that would have terrified the hegemony leadership if they could have seen it. "We're going to teach them why humanity doesn't abandon its friends. All human forces are being recalled from current operations. We're going to meet them at the Kethmori homeworld and show them what happens when they threaten our allies." 3 days later, Jake found himself in the crystalline council chambers on Zephyria, watching as representatives from dozens of species debated humanity's battle plan with a combination of awe and horror. The tactical holographic display showed human fleet positions that violated every principle of defensive warfare in the galactic military handbooks. "This is madness," protested Ambassador Zixara, her compound eyes reflecting the light from the tactical display in patterns of distress. "Your Admiral Sullivan is proposing to meet a force of 8,000 ships with fewer than 200 human vessels. The mathematics are clear," added root singer Myrith of the Sylvani, her leaves rustling with anxiety. "Even accounting for human tactical advantages, the numerical disadvantage is insurmountable." General Thundell raised one massive clawed hand for silence. His ancient features showed a mixture of gratitude and concern that had become familiar to Jake over the past months. "Friends, I appreciate humanity's willingness to stand with my people, but perhaps evacuation would be the wiser course." Jake stood and activated the holographic display, showing the assembled aliens exactly what humanity was planning. "General, with respect, humanity has some experience fighting impossible odds. The key is not to fight the enemy's strength, but to force them to fight on terms they're not prepared for." "Explain," requested Speaker Veltar of the Merlani. Jake manipulated the display to show the tactical situation around the Kethmori homeworld. "The hegemony is bringing their entire fleet because they want to put on a show. They're expecting a traditional defensive battle, where they can demonstrate their superior firepower to the watching galaxy." "And you're going to give them what they expect?" asked Zixara. "Not exactly," Jake replied, his smile becoming something that made several aliens take unconscious steps backward. "We're going to give them a human-style welcome instead." The holographic display shifted to show human fleet positions scattered across 3 star systems, positioned not in defensive formations but in what appeared to be offensive staging areas. Jake highlighted the movement patterns his people were planning to use. "The hegemony has never faced an opponent that actively seeks close combat," he explained. "Their entire tactical doctrine is based on long-range superiority and psychological warfare. They have no experience dealing with enemies who charge directly into their formations." "That sounds like suicide," whispered root singer Myrith. "It would be for any other species," Jake agreed, "but humans evolved as pack hunters on a world full of apex predators. We learned to coordinate attacks against enemies that were individually stronger than us, and we learned to keep fighting even when we were hurt and scared." Dr. Pierce appeared in the communication field from his mobile laboratory, his image surrounded by data streams and biological analysis charts. "I've been studying the psychological profiles of captured hegemony officers," he reported. "Their species evolved on worlds where superior technology guaranteed victory. They have no cultural framework for understanding opponents who willingly accept casualties to achieve objectives." "What does that mean in practical terms?" asked General Thundell. "It means they've never learned to handle fear," Dr. Pierce replied. "The biomechanical modifications they use to enhance their warriors are actually designed to suppress fear responses, because their original psychology couldn't cope with genuinely dangerous situations." Jake felt the pieces of the tactical puzzle clicking into place. "Doctor, are you saying that the hegemony biomachines will malfunction if they experience genuine terror?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, Captain. The psychological dampening systems work both ways. They can project fear, but they can't handle receiving it, the alien." Representatives looked at each other with expressions that ranged from confusion to something approaching horror as they began to understand what humanity was proposing. "You're planning to deliberately terrify them," said Ambassador Zixara, her voice barely above a whisper. We're planning to show them what it feels like to be hunted by something that enjoys the chase, Jake corrected. The hegemony has spent generations conquering civilizations that fought from a position of fear. They're about to meet a species that fights from a position of predatory joy. Speaker Veltar's water sphere clouded with complex emotions. This is not how civilized beings conduct warfare. No, Jake agreed. It's how apex predators defend their pack. And whether they realize it or not, the Galactic Council is humanity's pack now. General Thundel was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying the tactical displays with the experience of someone who had spent centuries watching civilizations rise and fall. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of decision that silenced the entire chamber.